Welcome to everybody who is with us today. Welcome to the whole audience. Today we have with us Jyotsna Lall, Heather Mehendi, and Shobha Kavoori. I have the privilege of introducing them to you. Jyotsna Lall is Director, Programs for the Agha Khan Trust in Delhi, Nizamuddin Basti Urban Renewal Initiative. She anchors a social development initiative in Nizamuddin Basti. Education is a key component of the project. She is a founder member of the Gramin Siksha Kendra, a grassroots organization in Rajasthan that works for education and social change. She has also worked for several years in the Gantar. She is the author of the book Schools for Thought, a study of small private schools in Jaipur. Welcome. Very happy to have you with us, Jyotsna.
Thank you, Prema.
Heather Mehdi Rizvi has worked for over 25 years in the field of education, with most of the significant education initiatives in Rajasthan and Delhi. His core skills include the development and execution of training modules for teachers, designing of interventions and curricula for pre-primary, primary, and middle school children, and implementing programs in the field in multiple locations. He has wide experience of working with government schools at grassroots level and is in both rural and urban areas. Advocacy with the government and engaging with the community to ensure the smooth running the smooth running of schools are also part of his core skills. After working with Sandhan and Lok Jumbish Society for all-round development, he has been with the Agha Khan Foundation since 2008. Welcome, Haider. We are
Thank
very
you.
happy to have you.
Yeah,
I
thank
think
you.
our interviewer today doesn't really require introduction because
Yeah.
we all know her. Shobha Kavoori is a member of the Bangalore District Institute of the Azim Premji Foundation. She was part of the Azim Premji Foundation schools team that set up the first Azim Premji schools. She's worked extensively over the areas of curriculum design, development, professional development, and language development in these schools. The article they are going to discuss is Worksheets, the experience of the Nizamuddin urban renewal. And we are very, very happy to have you. And I'm sure it's going to be a great discussion. Over to all of you.
Thank you, Prema.
Thank you.
Thanks, Prema. Good evening. So in December 2021, the UNESCO had conferred 2 awards for conservation efforts at Nizamuddin Basti. This was undertaken by the Agha Khan Trust for Culture. At that time, the jury had noted, and I quote, through an innovative people-private partnership model, the project overcame major socio-economic challenges, particularly for women and youth. Now, among other things, this included a school initiative. We have with us Jyotsna and Haider today. So, welcome to the two of you. So, I'll begin by asking you to give us a little about the background of this project. Tell us a little about the context of this entire project. You have mentioned a little in the article, but it'll be nice to set the context. Yeah.
So this is perhaps the only project of its kind in India that I know of. It's something. It's part of something larger, which we call the Agha Khan Historic Cities Program, which is essentially about improving the quality of lives of the local community. The roots of this project actually go back to 1993, when Humayun's tomb was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, um, with the condition that the gardens would be restored of Humayun's tomb. While the building was okay, but the gardens were a mess, and the Mughals have always had a thing for gardens, which were then finally copied by the Rajput kings, and then later by the British. But the Mughals really got these gardens with flowing waters into India. Some years later, in 1997, when India turned 50, His Highness the Aga Khan gifted the garden restoration project of Humayun's tomb to the people of India as a 50th anniversary gift. And we restored the gardens, and then we were politely asked to leave the site. But in 2005, we have something called the Aga Khan Architecture Awards, and the Prime Minister requested His Highness in his speech that this public-private partnership has worked very well in the field of culture, and why don't you do something more? And His Highness, who has been decorated with the Padma Vibhushan, I think about 4 5 years ago, well, he thought this is the Prime Minister of India asking me to do something, and I must do something about it. And therefore, it fit in very well with the Historic Cities program. And we worked with the Archaeological Survey of India. It would have been very easy for us to restore a monument, but the Aga Khan Development Network is not just about monuments or parks. It's actually about improving the quality of lives of people, and education is such a key component. So, to get three major government agencies, which is the Archaeological Survey of India, who is the custodian of Humayun's tomb, the Central Public Works Department, who owns Sundar Nursery, which is a 90 acres heritage park in the city, and the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, which runs all the health, education, sanitation facilities in Nizamuddin Basti, to get all of them to agree on a common memorandum of understanding, on a common MOU, took 2 years, simply because there were two central government agencies and one is a local government agency. So, and we were very clear that we wanted to work on all three areas. So finally, and after I think in 2007, July 11, 2007 to be precise, the MOU was signed, and we started working in all the three areas simultaneously. So ours is a multidisciplinary team. Heather and I, with our other colleagues, work at Nizamuddin Basti. My architect colleagues and engineering colleagues work on the other two sites, but most of us who work in Nizamuddin Basti do have a social development background. So we started, and as luck would have it, one municipal corporation of Delhi official announced that now that the Aga Khan Trust for Culture is here, they are going to knock down all your houses and they will create a park instead. That, of course, did not endear us to the community. And we wanted to tell the community we are here to stay and not demolish any houses. In any case, we can't do so. We're a non government organization, a rather large one, but nevertheless a non government organization. And we thought that putting the school in order, because would be one way of um, stating our intentions very clearly, that we are here to work for the improvement and on the quality of lives of people. And so we started with, like all socioeconomic, social development people do, with a baseline survey, except in our case, we call it a quality of life survey. And and the findings of that, I mean, I'm not going to go into that, but one of the key findings of that was that they wanted better education for their children. So
So
that's what
just,
we do.
sorry, Jyotsna, just since you mentioned quality of life, right
Hmm.
now you mentioned it and you mentioned it in the article too. So how exactly does one define that, and how do you measure it? How does one measure it?
So we have the Aga Khan Development Network Quality of Life Framework. It looks at five things. Health and education are the obvious things which everyone looks at. We also look at household economy. That's also not a surprise. But we also look at built and natural environment. But for me, I think what is most different is we also look at community and associational life and voice and representation. I mean, how do people represent themselves in the community? Do they feel that they are representing themselves? Are they able to say what they want to say? So these are the five measures, and it was the findings of this quality of life survey. So I think almost 60. So the funny thing is, many people just accept that this is our fate, that because we live in a settlement. Now Nizamuddin Basti just means settlement. When I first joined the project in 2011, I tried to find out what is Nizamuddin. Then I checked with my urban planning colleague, and she said, well, I can tell you what it is not. It is not an urban village. It is not a slum. It is not even Lal Dora, which is a classification of land in the Delhi government. I can only say it is a settlement and ward number this in Daryaganj election thing. So we don't know what it is. It is not classified as anything. If you ask my historian and culture colleagues, they will say, well, it is a 700-year-old settlement. This is the home of the Kavali, this is the home of the Sitar, this is where the shrine of Hazrat Nizamuddin Basti is, this is the seat of the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb of India. So it depends on whom you ask, what is Nizamuddin Basti. But to come back to quality of life framework, so people just assume that, yeah, we live in the settlement and, our health and education is going to be poor. They said, हाँ खराब है, but ऐसा ही होता है. This is how it is. Most people, almost 70% people, more than 70% people wanted to live in a cleaner place. They said there is piles of rubbish everywhere. Um,
Hmm.
Only 1% people had access to any open green space, and this is because we look at built and natural environment. Access to any formal organizations or employment in formal sectors was very low. um, 25% people did not have access to in-house toilets. This is central Delhi. I mean, I can go on. I mean, immunization was 30%. We are barely 5 kilometers away from Eames and Safdarjung.
So
Women,
essentially, when you say it is a stepping stone, heritage conservation, that was the uh, route you took
yes,
to improve.
the
So that
quality of
is
life.
what you are referring to when you say using heritage conservation
Yes,
as a
because His
stepping
Highness has a
stone.
very famous quote. He says that he says many people use agriculture or watershed development or animal husbandry as a stepping stone to improving quality of lives. We at the Aga Khan Trust for Culture use heritage as a stepping stone to life because sometimes that's the only asset that they have. In Nizamuddin Basti, there is no agriculture, there is no animal husbandry, there is no watershed, but there is Humayun's tomb.
There is a heritage.
There is a heritage.
700 years, you said.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, Jyotsna, you've mentioned several components.
Hmm.
How does all this come together? How does it knit together, and how do they all work together to create this? I know it's
Um,
a big question,
it's a
but if you could
complicated
condense
one.
and tell us
Let
a
me.
little bit.
It is complicated. Sometimes I think to myself that it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. There are all these elements, but the picture is only complete when you put all the things together. And when I solve a jigsaw puzzle, I look for the corner pieces. So when we were doing this project, we looked for the corner pieces. What are the key things that people will immediately relate to? And education and health were the two key things that we felt that people would relate to because as I mentioned, let me just try and describe the school which I have written, which Heather and I have written about in the article. So the
Yes.
Basti is 700 years old. The school was sanctioned sometime in the 1960s. The building came up in the 1990s, 30 years after the school was sanctioned. And people
Were
still
there
refer to
admissions? Were
there were
there
admissions.
admissions?
There were
And where
admissions.
did the children go?
Well, there was a tent, and it was called the Katre Wala School. Katra really means a place where buffaloes are sheltered. So the school building came up in 1990s, in the early 90s, and the MCD in all its wisdom built a three-story building. In 2007, when we walked into the school, our chief engineer was there. Heather joined a little later. There were so many flies that when you opened your mouth, the flies would fly in. And we all know the problem of multiple enrollment. So there were about 100 odd children enrolled in the school. I think 160 was, if I'm not mistaken, Heather, was the
Yeah,
enrollment figure. But there would be about 50 or 60 children
yeah.
coming to school on any given
Mm.
day. The principal, God bless him, uh, his wife was ill. And so he said because his wife was ill, he couldn't open the school on time. So even though the school time was 8, the school would open at 9 because he was looking after his wife. And I'm glad that he was, but I do wish he'd also looked after the children in his charge. And because the principal never came on time, so the teachers never came on time. Because the principal and teachers never came on time, so the children never came on time. And the stories I've heard, I haven't seen it, but Heather has told me incidents of physically removing a stick from the teacher's hand of class 5 girls. It's a primary school of grade 5 girls being taken by teachers to their homes to do domestic work, mopping and cleaning. So that used to be the state of the school when we walked in.
Is this a girls'
No, it's a
school, or
co-ed
is
primary
it's a
school.
co-ed?
Co-ed.
After the 74th Amendment, primary school went to local government in urban areas and the panchayat in rural areas. So it's a municipal corporation of Delhi school, and so that was what we walked into. And I think for me, the saddest was that people just accepted it as their fate. Those who had the money, and because Nizamuddin Basti is fairly diverse in economic, it's a 98% Muslim community, but in terms of economics, there is a fair bit of diversity. So we have a large migrant population, but we also have a tiny population which is fairly well to do. It's a tiny portion, but it is there. So those who could afford to would send their children away to private schools. But so the NCT school was basically left for those who could afford nothing better. Um, these 50, 60 children were sitting in a filthy building with very little classroom transaction. The windows were broken. In fact, the description that I read and I was being given was that there was no protection from weather. And my architect colleagues, they said, I was horrified. How could you have a school building with broken glass panes? And the windows, which had, the chicken coop mesh. So there was a glass which was broken, then a grill, then a chicken coop mesh, and it was gray. It used to look like a prison, and it was filthy. And I mean, I wish I could show you some of the pictures. So for those who are listening, I will just type out my. At some point, I'll be able to type out our website so you can take a look at the pictures of the school.
Yeah, they would
Yeah.
get a back. They would get a idea of what it was like. So,
Hmm.
Jyotsna, from what I understand, it was imperative that you step in with not just simple these things. You had to go right from the scratch, of the building itself and stuff like that. So, what were these first few initiatives that you took in the school? That is
Um,
question one, and then we'll
mhm.
move on. Yeah.
So the first thing we did actually, because people were convinced we were going to knock it down, we started off with uh, an arts activity. We started off with a summer camp, and we had about 45 children, if I'm not mistaken, Heather.
Yeah.
45 children taking part in a photography workshop, in a theatre workshop.
Yeah.
And Heather, what was the third thing we were doing?
What?
थर्ड थिंग तीसरी चीज हम क्या कर रहे थे, एक तो फोटोग्राफी थी, एक आर्ट थिएटर
हाँ,
था और एक मैगजीन निकाल रहे थे.
मैगजीन में निकाल देते हैं, न्यूज़पेपर. हाँ.
हाँ, सो हमने वो 40 days की, we did that 40-day workshop. And then we invited the community to come and take a look at what their children had done. Because
हाँ.
in all of this, the community had started to believe that our children cannot learn. Our children, because the municipal teachers kept saying, and I hate to say this, but I need to repeat it, ये कबाड़ी के बच्चे नहीं पढ़ सकते. But basically, these children of scrap dealers cannot be taught, the subtext being they're not worth being taught. And we wanted to give the community confidence that not only your children can learn, they're creative, but they need to be taught and they deserve to be taught for sure. So that's what we did. That was the first thing we did. And the community was like, what is this happening? This has never happened in our school, that we've been invited to come and see our children's work. And that somehow set the tone of it. Then we did a whole bunch of cluster meetings, by which time Heather had joined. So he was doing all these cluster meetings in the community. And then we did visualization workshops with parents and drawing workshops and with parents and children. How do you visualize your school? What do you want in your school? And based on which, then we involved Kabir Vajpayee, um, of the famous building as a learning aid,
Bala. Hmm.
Bala Elements.
बाला मलयाली.
And because our team also had a lot of architects, so we worked together and we basically transformed the school physically. The challenge was not to close the school while the building was being transformed. And so we started working in the summer vacation of 2008, and we closed off one floor each, and we started working. Fortunately, at that point in time, the enrollment wasn't so much, so we could close off one floor and work on the buildings. Essentially, what we were trying to do in the building, Shobha and Prema, is basically trying to meet NCD norms. One, safety norms, for example. The staircase is still not as wide as it should be. according to MCD norms. There simply isn't enough space. We widened the staircase by a foot. We were asked that, how does it help? Even if we could save one child in case there's a fire, that's enough for us. Every classroom got two doors, as is the norm, so that escape is easier should there be a fire. And remove the fire hazard, which was the electricity meter, which was on the floor. The school is at the lowest point, so it would flood. So we had to physically raise the electricity meter. So create a safe space and a space where children can learn. And so here I must tell you. So I have spent most of my life working in rural areas. This was the first time I was working in an urban area. When I walked into the school and I saw how beautiful the school was, the first thought in my head was, my God, this can never be replicated. And should we have done it? And then I went into people's homes and I said, no, these children need a beautiful school. And if others can't replicate it, that's not my problem.
I'll ask at this stage, Jyotsna, I want to ask Haider a little about the curriculum, and in particular, what is the kind of, because you are talking of a municipal school, what's the kind of pedagogy? एंड क्योंकि हमारा खास करके ये वर्कशीट्स के बारे में हम लोग बात करना चाह रहे हैं, तो मैं आपसे पूछना चाहूँगी इस करिकुलम के बारे में कि आप लोग किस तरीके से यहाँ पर क्या कर रहे हैं, किस तरह की इनिशिएटिव्स ले रहे हैं आप। दूसरी बात, कहीं पर आपने जिक्र किया है कि जो वर्कशीट्स आपका बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट एक TLM है, आप इसको काफ़ी इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं शुरू से ही। शुरुआत में आपने एक बाहर की संस्था, मेरे ख्याल से CI को आप लोगों ने उनके वर्कशीट्स उन्होंने बनाए थे आप लोगों के लिए, फिर आपने कहीं उसको बदलने का सोचा था। तो मैं ये पूछ रही हूँ, ये जो वर्कशीट्स आपने बदले हैं, वो इसको बदलने का कोई वजह होगी, पहली बात। और दूसरी, किस तरीके की प्रक्रिया आप लोगों ने करी? What is the kind of process you took so that the team itself, the team of teachers, could develop these worksheets? I'm coming straight to the worksheets because you have mentioned that that is a very central element in this whole pedagogy that you use. So please tell us.
तो ये जो वर्कशीट्स जो हमने डेवलप किए अभी तक, इनको अगर हम देखें तो 3 फेज में इनको हम बांट सकते हैं, जिसमें पहला फेज था कि जब हम एक रिसोर्स एजेंसी के साथ मिलकर काम कर रहे थे, और उस वक्त में जो वर्कशीट्स शुरुआती दौर की थी वो थी जो 2008 से और 2011 की रही। फिर एक दौर आया 2011 से और 2020 का। उस दौर में हमने अपनी वर्कशीट को और ज़्यादा इम्प्रूव किया, और फिर 2020 से और अब तक का जो पीरियड रहा है वो एक यूनिक रहा है और बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण रहा है इस सिलसिले में कि जो वर्कशीट्स हमने बनाई थी उनको हमने बहुत ही सिस्टमेटिक तरीके से हम रख पाए इस दौर में। तो पहले दौर की अगर हम बात करें करिकुलम की, तो उस वक्त में स्कूल में SCRT की बुक्स चलती थी और टीचर्स अपने हिसाब से वर्ण पद्धति पे काम कर रही थी, जिसमें अल्फाबेट्स
लेटर वर्ड अप्रोच,
बिल्कुल अल्फाबेट जो सिस्टम है उस पे काम कर रहे थे, जिसमें बच्चों को वर्ण सिखाए जाते थे, फिर 12 खड़ी सिखाई जाती थी, 12 खड़ी के बाद फिर मात्राएं सिखाई जाती थी, फिर बिना मात्रा के शब्द, फिर शब्द मात्रा वाले शब्द, उसके बाद फिर सेंटेंस बनाने, और फिर जो है क्लास 5th में जाके बच्चों को पढ़ना लिखना सिखाया जाता था। तो ये सिस्टम था। तो शुरू की जो हमने वर्कशीट्स बनाई थी एक्चुअली वो सारी उसी बेस पे थी, और उसकी वजह ये थी कि जो रिसोर्स एजेंसी हमारे पास थी उसका जो एक्सपीरियंस था वो इन्हीं वर्ण पद्धति के ऊपर था, और उसी पद्धति पे हमने वो वर्कशीट्स हमने डेवलप की। तो
एक्चुअली sorry Haider, that this was the approach up to what period? This is how the initial worksheets, जो पुराने worksheets थे, the initial worksheets use this approach, right? Please carry on.
2008 से 2011 का पीरियड था ये। इसमें करीब हमने 250 वर्कशीट्स हमने बनाई थी, जिसमें क्लास 1 से लेकर 5th तक थी, और इसमें हमने जो फोकस किया था वो बच्चों के पढ़ने पे फोकस किया था, साथ में बच्चों की संख्या ज्ञान और कुछ मैथमेटिकल ऑपरेशंस पे हमने फोकस किया था। और ये जो पेडागोजी थी वो टोटली, जैसे मैथ की अगर हम बात करें तो उसमें मैथ में कॉन्सेप्ट पे ज़्यादा काम नहीं हुआ था। सीधा अगर जमा सिखा रहे हैं तो 27 जमा 25 कितना होगा, सीधा जो जो ट्रेडिशनल तरीका उसी तरीके से हमने वर्कशीट्स में हमने उसमें उन चीज़ों को रखा था। और हिंदी की जो वर्कशीट्स थी उसमें
ये ट्रेडिशनल मेथड, दिस मेथड यू यूज्ड फॉर मैथ्स एंड लैंग्वेज, ट्रेडिशनल मेथड।
लैंग्वेज, यस यस
इसमें
यस यस।
इसमें एक चीज मैं जोड़ूंगी. आई मीन आई जस्ट लाइक टू ऐड वन थिंग. We were working only on Hindi and
मैथ्स
maths.
हिंदी,
We decided to focus our attention on the core skills of literacy and numeracy, and we were
Right.
not working with the CIE, or this was a private resource agency we had. We
हाँ
were
हाँ
working with them.
Okay.
हाँ।
All right. Right.
तो हाँ, तो जब हमने 2011 में अपने प्रोग्राम का रिव्यू किया, उसमें वर्कशीट्स को भी रिव्यू किया गया, क्योंकि इस वक्त तक हुआ क्या था कि पहले एससीईआरटी की बुक्स स्कूल में थी, लेकिन 2010 के बाद के आखिर तक, यानी 2011 की शुरुआत में एनसीईआरटी की जो बुक्स थी वो इंट्रोड्यूस हुई। और एनसीईआरटी की जो बुक्स थी वो पूरी संदर्भ पद्धति पे आधारित थी। जो कॉन्टेक्स्ट जो सिस्टम है उस पे थी कि उसमें शुरू में जो पहला हिंदी जिम का जो चैप्टर है वो शुरू ही इस चीज से होता है कि अम्मा आज लगा दे झूला। तो
The whole
कविता
language teaching approach,
हाँ
Shobha.
हाँ हाँ हाँ
Yeah.
हाँ। तो अब टीचर्स के साथ दिक्कत ये थी कि टीचर्स को इन बुक्स को लेकर कोई ट्रेनिंग नहीं दी गई। शायद अभी तक किसी किसी जगह कोई ट्रेनिंग नहीं है कि उन बुक्स को कैसे यूज किया जाए। ये 2005 के एनसीएफ के बाद जो बुक्स बनी थी ये पूरी ही चेंज बुक थी सारी, लेकिन इनको लागू किया गया 2010 में। 2010 के आखिर में ये स्कूल में आई हैं और 2011 से इनको स्कूल में पहुंचा गया, आरटीआई 2009 के बाद। इन बुक्स के आने के बाद जरूरत थी कि टीचर्स के साथ में इन सब पे बात की जाए, क्योंकि बुक्स जब यही चलनी है, बुक्स स्कूल में आ चुकी थी लेकिन उसके बावजूद टीचर बच्चों को वर्ण सिखा रहे थे, बारहखड़ी सिखा रहे थे, उसके बाद सेंटेंस बना रहे थे। यानी जो किताबें आई थी उन किताबों का बच्चों की पढ़ाई से दूर दूर तक कोई संबंध नहीं था। तो ये एक बड़ी समस्या थी कि कैसे उन किताबों को काम में लिया जाए। तो एनसीईआरटी की बुक्स को सही तरीके से काम में लिया जाए, उसके लिए हमें ज़रूरत थी कि ऐसे रिसोर्स पर्सन की या ऐसे व्यक्ति की जो इन चीज़ों पे काम कर चुके हैं और जिनको क्लासरूम में नए तरीकों से पढ़ाने का अनुभव है। तो फिर हमने राजस्थान से कुछ रिसोर्स पर्सन हमने हायर किए, उसके बाद उनके साथ मिलकर के हमने काम किया। और
Whether
उसके
1 minute.
हम्म,
Sorry to interrupt. The other thing, Shobha, and everyone, is the old worksheets that we were using. The context wasn't Nizamuddin,
यस,
or the context was
Yeah.
so different. So we had to
Which is
contextualize them
what
as
I
well.
Yes, which is why I
बिल्कुल।
was also wanting to know the worksheets that got created. Were they completely textbook? Because Haider is talking about textbooks, and
यस,
so I
हाँ
wanted to know whether these worksheets were, textbook based, or
So they were
was there
more
some.
competency based. So they were. I would just to add to what Heather has captured very well. Is these were they our resource person did work with teachers, both municipal teachers and community teachers, on how do you use these textbooks. But the focus was more on competencies, on how reading and writing, and on core skills of mathematics, of number recognition, the value of numbers, whole numbers,
बिल्कुल,
fractions, patterns, ascending, descending orders, place value. The core competencies, not so much in, the favorite phrase teachers have of covering the curriculum,
हाँ
but
हाँ, सिलेबस
but
खत्म
of
करना है, नॉट
हाँ.
दैट। तो ये जो वर्कशीट्स आप जिसकी जिक्र कर रहे हैं कि ये बना था बेस्ड ऑन यू नो competencies etc, how was this organized? हाइदर इसको कैसे ऑर्गेनाइज करा था? क्या ये कुछ थीम वाइज ऑर्गेनाइज किए गए? क्या इसका कुछ लेवलिंग था इन वर्कशीट्स का कि भाई आप शुरुआती तौर में इस तरह के वर्कशीट्स एक कॉन्सेप्ट को इंट्रोड्यूस करने के लिए आप बनाएंगे, उसके बाद में वर्कशीट्स को आप असेसमेंट तक ले जाते हैं, अक्सर हम वर्कशीट्स को, we see worksheets more as a practice, tool, that kind of thing. So did you at some point create some worksheets to make it a learning tool? Especially I'm asking this question given the last 2 years. uh,
राइट।
कुछ उस तरह की स- मतलब उस पूरे पैकेज में जो वर्कशीट्स का आपने बनाया है, उसमें क्या गुंजाइश है सीखने के लिए या प्रैक्टिस के लिए, और क्या ये थीमेटिक हैं, लेवल्ड हैं? इसके बारे में आप कुछ बताएं।
राइट। तो जो 2011 से 2020 का जो पीरियड था, वो टीचर्स के लिहाज से बहुत, सीखने के लिहाज से बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण रहा था, क्योंकि इस दौर में पूरी पेडागोजी चेंज हुई थी। और जहाँ हम पहले वर्ण से शब्द, फिर उसके बाद टेक्स्ट पे आ रहे थे, यहाँ हम टेक्स्ट में से शब्दों को निकाल रहे हैं, उनमें से फिर वर्णों को सीख रहे हैं। वर्णों को सीखने के बाद जो वर्ण सीखे हैं, उनको नए सीखे हुए वर्णों में जोड़ करके नए शब्द बना रहे हैं, फिर अपने वाक्य बना रहे हैं, और फिर अपनी कहानी और अपनी कविताएं बना रहे हैं। तो पूरी पेडागोजी एकदम चेंज हुई। तो ये बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण रहा था। इसमें हमने शुरू में ये किया था कि जो जो बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट्स हैं मैथ्स के और हिंदी के, उनके ऊपर हमने वर्कशीट्स डेवलप की थी। तो अलग अलग तरह से, जैसे पढ़ने के लिए हमने बहुत सारी वर्कशीट्स की, जिसमें हमने ये किया कि कविताएं लिखी थी, कुछ उसमें से शब्दों को चयन किया था, फिर उन शब्दों को दिया था। वो पूरी पेडागोजी किया था। लेकिन बाद में 2020 के बाद से जो अब तक किया है, उसमें हमने बहुत ही सिस्टमेटिक तरीके से, क्योंकि इस दौर में बच्चे यहाँ नहीं थे हमारे पास, और ये बहुत ही एक बड़ा चैलेंज था कि जब बच्चे हमारे पास नहीं हैं, ऐसे में टीचर बच्चों को कैसे सिखाए। तो बहुत ही बड़ी चुनौती हमारे सामने थी। ऐसे में हमने जो जो काम किया वो बहुत ही सिस्टमेटिक तरीके से किया कि हमने पहले प्लान किया कि स्कूल के एसएमसी उनके साथ मिलकर के बातचीत की, फिर पेरेंट्स के साथ बातचीत की, टीचर्स के साथ बातचीत की, सबके साथ मिलकर के एक प्लान, एक योजना बनी, और ये तय किया कि अ, जो माँ बाप हैं, पेरेंट्स के जरिए बच्चों को कुछ सिखाया जाए। अब एक चैलेंज हमारे
एक
सामने ये
मिनट
था।
हैदर, सॉरी,
जी।
मैं शोभा के सवाल का जवाब देती हूँ। शोभा, you asked about levels and themes. So,
हाँ, हाँ।
see, initially, from 2011 till about 15, the worksheets were to supplement what was happening in the classroom with textbooks. So they were according to levels and according to themes. So that was basically a support tool for the community teachers and the municipal teachers to transact the curriculum in class. The I would say the worksheets as a core teaching methodology really came into, and which is what Heather is indicating, really came into being during the COVID period when children had no access to schools. And like I
Right.
said like we said in an article, the pandemic hit us in March 2020, but the Delhi schools had been closed since December 2019. We had protests, we had pollution, we had riots. It was a terrible time, and children were not in school since I think late November or early December 2019. And they've only gotten back to school now. So that is why this whole engagement with the community on what do we do with worksheets. Heather, अब वो कि हमने बच्चों को कैसे levels में divide किया, कैसे वो किया, वो आप
राइट।
बताइए।
हाँ।
और उसे
तो
बताने से पहले, हाइदर, आई एम सॉरी फॉर कटिंग यू, आप उसको जरूर मुझे बताएं। आई वांटेड टू आस्क प्रेमा कि कुछ अगर हमारे जो सुनने वालों में से कोई सवाल आया हो, प्रेमा, एनी क्वेश्चंस दैट दे माइट वांट टू
Not
आस्क?
yet, Shobha.
Yeah.
Not yet.
All right,
Yeah, I'll
thank you,
just
thank
tell
you so
you. I'll
much.
send you a message.
You're very
Thank you.
clear.
Sure, thank you so much. So Haidar, please carry on, please tell
हाँ,
us.
तो जो योजना थी वो ये बनी कि पेरेंट्स के थ्रू बच्चों को पढ़ाया जाएगा। अब उसके बाद जब जब ये बात आई, तो फिर मसला ये आया था कि पेरेंट्स को भी ट्रेनिंग भी देना पड़ेगा कि उन वर्कशीट्स को हम माँ बाप उनको कैसे सिखाएंगे, है ना। और उसमें एक बड़ा चैलेंज ये था हमारे सामने कि बहुत सारे माँ बाप ऐसे थे जिनको पढ़ना लिखना आता ही नहीं था। तो ये भी एक चैलेंज था। टीचर्स ने, स्कूल टीचर्स और कम्युनिटी टीचर्स ने मिलकर के सारे बच्चे जो उनके पास थे, उनको 3 लेवल में डिवाइड किया। तो पहला लेवल जो था वो ये था कि वो बच्चे जिनको, जो बिगनर्स हैं, शुरुआत जिन्होंने की है, जिन्होंने अभी-अभी इसी साल स्कूल में एडमिशन लिया है, या फिर बड़ी कक्षाएँ जो थीं, उनमें वो बच्चे जो बीच में एडमिशन लेते हैं, क्योंकि आईटी के तहत जो एडमिशन होते हैं वो एज के अकॉर्डिंग होते हैं, कि अगर अगर बच्ची कोई 9 साल की है तो उसको क्लास फर्स्ट में एडमिशन नहीं मिलेगा, बेशक वो किसी स्कूल में गई या नहीं गई है, उसको क्लास फिफ्थ में एडमिशन मिलेगा। अगर 7 साल की कोई बच्ची है तो उसको क्लास थर्ड में एडमिशन मिलेगा। तो ये आईटी के तहत लेकिन जो बच्चे क्लास फिफ्थ में, थर्ड में या फोर्थ में एडमिशन हुए हैं डायरेक्ट, उनको तो पढ़ना लिखना नहीं आता अभी, तो उनको भी हमने लेवल फर्स्ट में हमने रखा। और लेवल सेकंड में हमने उन बच्चों को रखा जो बच्चे कुछ कुछ शब्दों को रख रख के पढ़ना, या 1 से 50 तक की संख्या है जिनको पता है, कुछ जमा घटा का कॉन्सेप्ट जिनके पास है, जो क्लास फर्स्ट और सेकंड कर चुके हैं, या क्लास थर्ड फोर्थ में भी जो बच्चे पिछड़ गए हैं किसी वजह से, उन बच्चों को हमने लेवल 2 में रखा। बाकी जो सारे बच्चे थे उनको सबको हमने लेवल थर्ड में रखा, जो ठीक ठाक पढ़ना जानते थे, कुछ सवाल भी कर लेते थे मैथ्स में। इस तरह से हमने 3 लेवल हमने इनको बनाए थे, और 3 लेवल के हिसाब से हमने 3 तरह के वर्कशीट्स हमने बच्चों को प्रोवाइड की। तो ये 8 पेज का एक पूरा पैकेज था 1 वीक में। इस 8 पेज में 3 पेज थे हिंदी के, 3 मैथ्स के, 1 पेज था आर्ट्स का, ड्राइंग और आर्ट्स का, और जो तीसरा पेज, जो दूसरा पेज था वो था जिसमें
हेरिटेज।
हेरिटेज शामिल है, एनवायरनमेंट शामिल है, सैनिटेशन शामिल है, और हेल्थ से रिलेटेड जो सवाल, जो जो चीज़ें हैं, एक्टिविटीज़ हैं, वो शामिल हैं। तो इस तरह से हमने हर वीक बच्चों को 8 पेज का ये पैकेज दिया। माँ बाप को हमने कॉल किया, टीचर्स ने बुलाया उनको, उनको ट्रेनिंग्स दी कि
तो
इन
एक
वर्कशीट्स को।
सवाल है मेरा कि ये जो
जी।
पैकेज की बात आप कर रहे हैं, was this package all about worksheets or
Worksheets.
was it activity based? What did the package contain? Because heritage की भी बात कर रहे हैं आप, art की भी बात
हम्म
कर रहे हैं,
हम्म
so
हम्म
I'm wondering, was this worksheet based or something else? Please.
Let me
हाँ,
answer that one, Heather. It
Yeah.
the essence the es- I would say the essential tool for engagement was this educational package. So I have always hesitated from using the word only worksheets. The tool for engagement was a worksheet because this was the time when children were not allowed in school. Uh, there was a directive that you cannot call children to school, but the worksheets by itself had different activities. So we would sit with the community teachers would sit with the parents and say, well, you could tell them stories, you can teach them basic counting for the pre-primary children with the dishes that you have. There were videos of mothers sending their children walking along a straight line or on a rope. So there were activities mentioned in the worksheets which could be done at home either with the help of parents or with other
Right.
children. We also encouraged the older siblings to sit with the younger siblings and work together because you know about cross learning. You know, younger children and older children working together learn so much better. So yeah, that was also done. So tool for engagement worksheets, but worksheets had the activities.
Right. हाँ जी,
हम्म। हाँ,
जी हैदर।
तो इन वर्कशीट्स जो बनाई, इनमें खास ध्यान रखा गया था कि बच्चों को ऐसी चीजें दी जाएं जिनको माँ बाप आसानी से कर सकें। जैसे अगर हम हिंदी की बात करें तो हिंदी में हमने पिक्चर दी, और पिक्चर के साथ में डबल लाइन से लिखा हुआ एक अक्षर। जैसे मैं आपको दिखाऊं कि वर्कशीट्स, ये अगर आप इसको देखें तो ये एक
जी।
वर्कशीट है जिसमें पिक्चर बनी हुई है, और डबल लाइनिंग से जो है उसका नाम लिखा हुआ है ना। और ऊपर टीचर्स के लिए, सॉरी, माँ बाप के लिए इसमें कुछ इंस्ट्रक्शंस लिखे हुए हैं कि इनको करना कैसे है। तो जो माँ बाप पढ़ना जानते थे उन्होंने इसको आसानी से किया, और जो पढ़ना नहीं जानते थे उनको उनको हमने बताया कि इसको करना कैसे है। जैसे एक दानिश, एक लड़का है, उसकी माँ हमारे पास आती है, कहने लगे वर्कशीट हमारे पास आ रही है लेकिन मुझे पढ़ना नहीं आता, मैं अपने बच्चों को पढ़ाऊँ कैसे। तो ये बड़ा आसान हो गया। टीचर्स ने उनसे सवाल किया कि ये क्या है, तो उन्होंने कहा कमल है ये। तो टीचर ने कहा कि कमल लिखा हुआ है ये, है ना। अब इसमें बच्चे ने कलर किया, इस चीज को बार बार उसने लिखा। तो आगे अगर हम आगे जो हमने इसमें एक्टिविटी दी वो उसमें ये कि इसी इन्हीं 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 पिक्चर्स के साथ में हमने फिर डॉकेट में उसका नाम लिखा, और फिर आगे 3 जगह उनको खाली छोड़ी ताकि बच्चे उनको लिख सकें। उनके नाम को लिख सकें। इस तरह से बच्चे ने घर पे प्रैक्टिस की और माँ बाप के लिए भी आसान हुआ काम करना कि वो उसको कैसे कराएं। तो उसके लिए आसान हुआ कि, और दानिश की अम्मी बहुत खुश हुई, कहने लगी ये तो मैं आराम से कर सकती हूँ, कि ठीक है कमल है, मैं उसको बोलूंगी ये कमल लिखा हुआ है तो वो कमल पढ़ेगा, है ना। तो
And in
इस तरह
fact,
से
Danish's mother also learned to read in the process. She learned to read a little in the process.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, उसने जब हमें आखिर में हमें बहुत अच्छा लगा जब उसने ये कहा कि मैं पढ़ना सीख रही हूँ और मैं पढ़ना सीख गई हूँ उससे। इवन मैथ्स के सवाल भी कि काउंटिंग करना, उसने चीज़ों को गिना, गिन के फिर नंबर को पहचाना, ये 4 चीज़ें हैं तो ये 4 लिखा हुआ है। ये इस तरह की कुछ चीज़ें उसने जब जब उसने हमसे शेयर की और उस अपनी खुशी ज़ाहिर की, तो वो एक अलग ही मतलब था हमारे लिए एक एक्सपीरियंस कि किस तरह से वो माँ खुश हुई थी और उसको अच्छा लगा था। तो हमने इनको बहुत ही सिस्टमैटिक तरीके से कि कैसे-कैसे हम उसको लेकर के आगे बढ़ेंगे, चीज़ों को लेकर के आगे बढ़ेंगे, कि पहले हमने बच्चों को चित्रों के ज़रिए हमने शब्द सिखाए हैं। उस शब्दों को फिर हमने उसको अलग-अलग तरीके से हमने टेस्ट किया है, उसका उसका आकलन किया है। जैसे कभी हमने पिक्चर्स हमने दे दी है और फिर हमने कहा है कि इसका नाम लिखो, या हमने खाली शब्द दे दिया है फिर कहा कि उसकी पिक्चर बनाओ, तो दोनों तरफ से उसको हमने आँका है कि कैसे बच्चे
तो
उसको
ये
कर पाएँ।
आंकलन का असेसमेंट का हिस्सा है, दिस इज
हाँ,
ऑल्सो
हाँ,
पार्ट
हाँ।
ऑफ दैट पैकेज
राइट, राइट, राइट,
उन
राइट।
वर्कशीट्स
ये
में
Um,
ही।
बिल्कुल।
I
जी, जी।
mean, in that sense, you keep cross-checking is the child learning, and there is
हाँ,
progression over a
हुँ,
period of time. The formal assessment was done in July
जू
2021.
यस, यस।
This was at the request of the donor agency who was supporting us. They
हाँ,
were like a brick, and they supported us. But they said,
हाँ,
we're happy to support you, but we want to know how much have children learned or not learned. And we just said, okay, let's do a competency based assessment. And we picked 100 children in random because we are working in 3 schools. And I think we made a list of all the children, and we picked every 6th child or something, and we did a competency based. And we said we really have nothing to lose. If the children have lost learning, well, we need to continue working with them. If they have
हुँ,
retained their learning, then great, we've been able to do something. But we were so pleasantly surprised to find out that in many areas, children were learning better because this was the only support that these children had throughout those 2 horrible years when the schools were closed. The
हुँ,
areas where the learning levels had fallen from the previous times, and we could compare because we've been doing a competency based assessment every year since we started working. The only areas where the learning levels had fallen was those areas where there was a need for a classroom discussion, where where the teacher had to have a greater direct
yeah,
engagement, where there was a
डेफिनिशन।
need for imagination or
हुँ,
creativity, or to put things down. That was the areas where people felt. But in terms of what are called core skills of literacy and numeracy, they were very much intact and growing, fortunately. So we are hoping
right,
children will be able to cope in school.
right. सो हाइदर, आप बात को मतलब कंटिन्यू रखते हुए आप कह रहे थे हमें कि कैसे इसको बढ़ाएंगे। तो एक
हाँ,
तो
हाँ।
कि गणित में तो हम समझ में आती है कि भाई जिस तरीके से आप इसको आगे बढ़ाएंगे, वर्कशीट्स की लेवल्स करेंगे, इसको
हुँ, हुँ,
कॉन्सेप्ट को आगे ले जाएंगे कॉम्पिटेंसी के आधार पे।
हुँ,
तो भाषा में इसको कैसे किया गया? आपने कहा 3 लेवल्स के
हाँ,
लिए, तो क्या ये जो वर्कशीट्स की पैकेजेस उन 3 लेवल्स के लिए बनाई गई थी, कि इसको किस तरीके से ऑर्गेनाइज
हाँ,
किया गया है इन वर्कशीट्स को और कैसे बनाया था, ये
हुँ,
बताएं हम।
हाँ। तो तीनों लेवल के लिए ही वर्कशीट बने हैं, पैकेज बने हैं, और तीनों लेवल को कैसे बच्चों को करना है, वो सारे पूरा सिस्टमैटिक तरीके से उनको रखा गया है। तो हम बात
जी,
कर रहे थे कि शब्दों से पहले हमने शब्द सिखाए थे क्लास लेवल 1 में। शब्दों के बाद फिर हमने उनको उनको तोड़ना सिखाया, वर्ण सिखाने के लिए। तो सबसे पहले हमने नाम से शुरुआत की कि नाम को कैसे तोड़ेंगे। तो अगर मेरा नाम अगर हैदर है तो मैं है द र, इसमें 3 आवाज़ आ रही हैं। इन 3 आवाज़ की पहचान करना हमने सिखाया। फिर हमने है, द और र 3 वर्ण सिखाए। इस तरह से बहुत सारे वर्ण जो भी बच्चों ने सीखे थे शब्द, उन सब के वर्णों को अलग किया। फिर बच्चों ने उनको जोड़ करके नए शब्द बनाए, कुछ एक्टिविटीज़ हमने दी, और उसके बाद बच्चों से हमने कुछ-कुछ चीज़ें शब्द बना करके सेंटेंस लिखवाना शुरू किया। तो लेवल 2 में यहाँ से लेवल 2 का काम शुरू होता है कि जब बच्चों को शब्द पढ़ना आता है, तो बच्चे उन वर्ण पढ़ने आते हैं या वर्णों की पहचान है, तो कैसे वर्णों से वो शब्दों को बनाएं, फिर उनसे छोटी सी कहानियां लिखें। ठीक है, तो बच्चों से कहानियां और कविताओं पे काम किया। लेवल
तो
थर्ड में
ये
हमने
काम जो, सॉरी बट ये काम जो आप बता रहे हैं, ये क्या
हाँ
बच्चे जब वापस स्कूल आए तब हुआ कि कैसे? मतलब वर्कशीट्स के जरिए तो नहीं
घर
हुआ
पे,
होगा,
हाँ घर,
तो ये
हाँ हाँ
कब हुआ और ये कैसे?
वर्कशीट के जरिए सारा काम हुआ।
ये
और
वर्कशीट्स के जरिए ही हुआ।
वर्कशीट के जरिए हुआ सारा काम, पूरा
तो
रिटर्न में
क्या
काम
ये
दिया हमने।
पैकेज का हिस्सा है?
ये पैकेज का हिस्सा है, ये
जी,
पैकेज का हिस्सा
ओके।
है।
So
और
worksheet में Shobha, there is space in the worksheet for children to
हाँ
write, and the
हम्म,
ओके,
teachers are available on call.
हाँ
मतलब
Uh,
अपनी बात बता सकें वो जनरली।
हाँ,
हाँ हाँ
हाँ,
हाँ
और डाउट्स क्लैरिफाई कर सकें।
हाँ।
ओके,
तो वीकली
राइट,
बेसिस
प्लीज।
पे पेरेंट्स आते आते उसको समझते थे बैठ करके, और उनको इतना इंटरेस्ट आया बाद में कि नहीं मुझे ये चीज़ नहीं आती, मुझे सिखाओ, मैं कैसे करूं। जैसे मल्टीप्लिकेशन का मामला है कि मैं इसको कैसे करूं, है ना। तो उसको उनको बैठ कर पूरा समझाया गया कि कैसे समूह हैं, किस किस उन समूह को हम कैसे जमा करेंगे, जमा करने को ही हम मल्टीप्लिकेशन कहते हैं। वो पूरा कॉन्सेप्ट उनको वर्कशीट पे जो दिया हुआ था पूरा उनको पेरेंट्स को समझाया, और उसके बाद उन्होंने जाके उनको बच्चों के साथ घर पे किया। तो किसी भी कॉन्सेप्ट पे, चाहे मैथ्स का है चाहे हिंदी का है, अभी हम बात करें कि हिंदी की, तो हिंदी में फिर हमने लेवल थर्ड में हमने बच्चों को कुछ छोटी, क्योंकि वो बच्चे ऐसे थे जो पढ़ सकते थे खुद से, और उनको हमने कुछ कविताएं दी, कुछ कहानियां दी, उसमें से हमने कुछ जानकारियां निकाली, सवाल पूछे बच्चों से, बच्चों ने उनके सवाल लिखे, और ये सारे ज़्यादातर सवाल थे इमेजिनेशन के ऊपर या फिर उनकी क्रिएटिविटी के ऊपर।
तो थोड़ा
हालांकि इनमें
समझ
कुछ,
की तरफ,
हाँ समझ
उनकी
की तरफ,
समझ के तरफ ले
हाँ
गए,
हाँ
ठीक
हाँ हाँ
है।
हाँ हाँ हाँ। हालांकि इमेजिनेशन पे जैसा कि हमने बताया कि इमेजिनेशन पे उतने अच्छे जवाब नहीं आ पाए जैसे आने थे, क्योंकि टीचर्स जब क्लास में बच्चों से बात करती है तो वो बच्चे अलग ही इमेजिन करते हैं, घर पे माँ बाप करेंगे तो उसमें थोड़ा फर्क तो होता है। तो थोड़ा सा फर्क यहाँ रहा, लेकिन फिर भी बच्चों ने बहुत अच्छे से जवाब उनके लिखे। अब अगर हम मैथ्स की बात करें तो मैथ्स में हमने शुरू से प्री नंबर कॉन्सेप्ट से लेकर के और मल्टीप्लिकेशन और डिवीजन तक हमने लेवल थर्ड में हमने हमने रखा, अलग अलग लेवल में, है ना।
So
तो
that
उसमें
is based on the competency levels of class
कॉम्पिटेंसी
4 and
लेवल्स, यस
5, is
यस
it?
यस यस, पूरा
Also, in
टोटली कंप्लीट।
language, to add,
हम्म
Shobha, the complexity of the language kept
हम्म
increasing.
हम्म हम्म हम्म
So from very simple sentences, the complexity in sentences kept increasing, as happens in
बिल्कुल।
any language teaching program. So that was
So
also taken care of. And the
so
way it
these
worked
were,
was, yeah,
so
and the way it worked,
sorry, yeah,
you
go
carry on.
ahead, please, please,
So
please.
Heather would sit with the teachers every week, and they would prepare the worksheets which had to go out the following week. So every Thursday and Friday, they were preparing worksheets which had to be given out at the beginning of the next week, and then the parents would come and return those worksheets. Teachers would correct them and sit with the parents that this is what has happened and this is what has not happened. So it was basically teaching children through parents kind of program, and with worksheets being the tool for engagement. So that is what was
So
happening.
actually, you've kind of answered what I wanted to know. The development of these worksheets with the by the team with Haider to guide them was definitely, do you feel was much more effective than using worksheets that were developed by a different agency? I mean, although that was also, there was a difference.
Absolutely, because
And I asked this question particularly because you have, there must be a, obviously you've leveled it, you've gone by competency, you're looking at language and math, you have developed packages for levels at primary level. I would, this is for up to class 5, right?
that's right.
So you also talk of a worksheet bank,
Mhm.
and that people, some of our viewers here, some people listening might want to access those worksheets. So that worksheet bank, how would it be organized? Is it on already, or is it in the, is there a, is it on the anvil, and how is it organized, and how would somebody who was not part of developing it, how would they be able to use it effectively, and where can they access it?
So two things. Our project, we've been in this area since 2007. It's odd because our project actually, the formal MOU comes to a close on Monday, 11th of July 2022.
Okay. Okay.
So it's very timely that we are having this conversation. But all the worksheets are being organized. Heather has a very good record of them, but they are going to be put online on our website. One of the key objectives of our project is to offer whatever we've learned, whatever we have, what has worked and what has not worked in the project to the larger development community. All of this will be available fairly soon on our website, which is I have put it in the private chat because I can't comment. But it's if you Google Nizamuddin and Agha Khan, you land up at our project website, and all the work that we've done will be available for the larger development community, not just in education but in all our other areas of health and sanitation, etc., etc. Thank you for putting it in nizamuddinrenewal.org. So all of it will be available. It is organized according to levels and subjects. So level 1 Hindi, level 2 Hindi, level 3 Hindi, level 1 maths, level 2 maths, level 3 maths. In addition, there is also, which we haven't spoken of here, but we also have an activity bank for pre-primary education. Because we were also working on Anganwadis, and when we started working, there wasn't a curriculum for Anganwadis in Delhi. So we ended up doing a curriculum. So yeah, that will also be available on the website.
Wonderful. So I would assume there would be a some kind of a manual, or I don't know what to call it, a
So
little
activity
booklet
bank
which will
really.
give people who
हम्म,
are going to use it some idea of how to
How
use
do you?
those
Yes. Some
worksheets.
instructions on that.
Absolutely. Now, we have just that much time. I need two questions I do need to ask you. Number one is you mentioned a heritage curriculum, and you mentioned that the worksheet package would had EVS and things like that. So, tell us a little about the heritage curriculum, and I asked this question because we are relating it to a worksheet. So tell us a little about how you visualize this, and
So,
what is this
so,
all about?
so the heritage curriculum stems because we work in a heritage rich area. But I
Right.
think that every part of India is a heritage rich area. There is no village or no locality which doesn't have a temple, a fort, or uh, some old building or some old natural habitat. What we have done for the heritage curriculum, and that will also be available on the website, is essentially look at what are the natural resources and the heritage resources we have, and how could you learn Hindi and maths or language and maths through them. So you could visit, say, a temple or a monument, and you look at the flow patterns, and you say, okay, does the pattern repeat? The teacher with all his or her creativity can design sums around that. They can learn about the history, they can write the story. So with that one monument you can combine a field trip, fun, but also language, maths, sociology, and history, depending on how old the children are. So we have things for we have heritage worksheets which have used the Chauncet Khamba, which is a monument in Nizamuddin Basti, but we've also used it in the Nursery Heritage Park. We've also used the Telanganese tomb. We've made patterns. It's really depends on the teacher's creativity, and I'm happy to share that with whoever wants to know.
Yeah, because you did mention that it is very much a part of the package. So, since you mentioned these particular monuments, a teacher wanting to use some other monument and wanting to teach similar concepts, would those worksheets, access to those worksheets, give them some idea of how to, at least some idea? Of course, after that, they need to, it is the teacher's own, initiative. But would that give some idea to our
Oh,
teachers as to
definitely.
how?
Definitely. They obviously wouldn't be
Right.
able to use those very same worksheets because those things exist around the area of Nizamuddin. But you just need to say, okay, it would give them a fair idea on how can a monument or a natural resource be used to do things. You would need to replace the local context, the local language, the local story around that area, uh, and to use it to teach language, for example. Or you
Right.
could use a particular resource for data collection and analysis and presentation, depending on what it is. It could be a weekly heart. how, what kind of people go to the weekly heart, what is sold there, and what percentage, how, what is the average people spend, what do children eat, when did they start eating pasta, for example, instead of a jalebi. I mean, there is just the potential is
Yeah, because
huge.
you did mention that, of course, these are all pedagogy that one would think would be extremely useful for children. But, and you did mention that, I think in the article you say that while the community's support for
Hmm.
worksheets has
Hmm.
been its success, in the sense it is using their support that you were able to take the worksheets forward to the children. But in the same light, you also in the article say, however, you observe a fall in skills and abilities that needed discussion, imagination, creativity, and interaction with teachers and other children in a formal setting.
Right.
So I would like to ask you that now that the schools have reopened, there are these gaps that you noticed, and you have tried to do this through worksheets. What you have told me about heritage, heritage worksheets, etc. But these things would require a classroom setting. So, how are you looking at filling these gaps? Would more such worksheets be developed? And, what is the plan for the teachers for the future? Is there some kind of a plan?
um, that is perhaps the most difficult question to answer, but let me try to answer it. So, as our project transitions, we have set up a community based organization called the Association for Development of Nizamuddin.
Okay.
The focus will be on monitoring for the community, monitoring the municipal school. Easier said than done because the principal doesn't, they want to work without interference, as they call it. But we will have to find bridges, and I'm sure that we will find the bridges. The other thing which has happened is that for some things, the Delhi government also takes over the municipal schools. So they have started something called Mission Bunyad, and which is a Delhi government initiative, and they have included the MCD schools also in that. Unfortunately, the Delhi government seems to speak our language, and they have also divided children into levels: level one, level two, and level three. So there seems to be some activity and some acceptance that children need to be left without being burdened of finishing the curriculum, but just be given some time to regain their core skills. So we are hopeful that between our intervention and with Mission Bunyad, uh, we'll be able to we'll be able to get children to where they need to go. Um,
Right. So, Prema, we are nearing the end, and when you get talking to people who have worked in a particular area, this just goes on and on. Are there some questions that our audience have, or would you like to ask Jyotsna and Haider
Actually,
something? Please go
I
ahead.
have a question, which is that you train them up at a certain level, as you say, level one, level two, and do you keep in touch with children as they grow up and leave? Do they join schools then? And how do they use the learning they have got from your efforts or your initiative?
Absolutely, we track the children. We track children at two levels. We track them when they come from the Anganwadi to the school. That's one level, to ensure that all the children who were enrolled in the Anganwadi do show up in school, are enrolled in school. When they leave the primary school in at class 5, we track them to make sure that most children have indeed gone to government school. And that's the beauty of our program, because we work with adolescent boys and girls through our health program. We have an English program for adolescent children. So we are in touch with most children. Throughout one program or the other, we are working with almost 95% of the community, one way or the other. So we are very much in touch with children. Then even after that, after they finish school, we had a career development center, or an employment program for youth. So because we follow the life cycle approach, we're pretty much in touch with them. And it is a geographically small settlement. So it's not very hard. I can see one question in Hindi on the screen. I can answer that. Mm,
Yeah, from Asif Mohammed.
from आसिफ मोहम्मद. तो आसिफ जी, लॉकडाउन में प्रत्येक पेरेंट के पास कैसे पहुंच बनाई गई होगी? तो हमारी जो कम्युनिटी टीचर्स हैं वो कम्युनिटी से ही हैं, वो वही उसी समुदाय में रहती हैं. तो वो क्लस्टर और हमारे प्रोजेक्ट में बहुत सारे पार्क्स भी डेवलप हुए. तो कई बार पार्क में मीटिंग होती थी, कई बार स्कूल के बरामदे में मीटिंग होती थी और कई बार फ़ोन से संपर्क भी होता है. तो तीनों तरह से पेरेंट्स से बातचीत हो पाती है. और जिन बच्चों को समझ में नहीं आ रहा था या नहीं नहीं हो पा रहा था, तो हमारी जो टीचर्स थी वो पेरेंट्स को समझाती थी कि आप अपने बच्चों को ये किस तरह से पढ़ा सकते हैं. अम, और फिर क्योंकि हर हफ्ते बच्चे आ रहे होते थे, तो इसीलिए हर हफ्ते सारे पेरेंट्स आ रहे होते थे, तो इसीलिए इसको ट्रैक कर पाना बहुत ज़्यादा मुश्किल नहीं था. The other thing which I would like to add is, something which we were struggling for years to get the parents more interested in their children's education, because generally parents seem to think that once they enrolled a child in school, their job is done. And it was through the pandemic when they feared that the children would lose the advantage of education, because the children of um, well-to-do parents had access to online education. Their children didn't have access to online education because a survey told us that only 20% children had access to a smartphone, and that too for only 20 minutes a day. So when they feared that their child would lose this advantage of education, and perhaps only government document that proved their residence in Delhi. So these two factors suddenly made the education which the school was providing far more precious uh, than what it was earlier when they had taken it for granted. And I think it was a combination of regular support from our teachers, regular contact from our teachers, and this fear that the children would lose the education advantage, which made this whole worksheet education thing. When worksheets are nothing new, all teachers, Shobha and Prema, all teachers use worksheets. It's really not rocket science. It's just what you do with them, the regularity and sincerity that we use them. I think that made the difference. I mean, nothing is really new. I mean, I was once read a book called "Steal Like an Artist," so there's nothing new in that sense.
Right. Right, but the experience of having developed it and used it, and uh, using the community to take it forward, I think has been the
Yeah,
success story
yeah,
of
that is.
all your efforts. So yeah, I think we're up for time now, and thanks so much, Jyotsna and Haider. There's a lot more. I think if we look at the package and we could access that, that would make a great difference to all of us who are practicing and looking at teaching children at primary level. So thanks a lot for that.
Thank you, Shobha and Prema, for this, for letting us share.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being with us and spending your time with us and illuminating our so many questions. It was really so important for us to know all this, because if you see the issue, which you will be soon getting, the hard copies also here now, you'll see that, across the country, as you just said, people have been using this particular, if you like, TLM to bring up the children in this very dreadful time, as you rightly said, in the COVID time, which has made the worksheets a very important tool in the hands of teachers. And we are very, very grateful to you for coming here and telling us all this. So thank you very much. To the audience, I will say that please revisit the same thing on the 3rd of August when we'll be having our next webinar. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Thank you.
us.
Thank you so much.
Bye
Thank you.
bye.